What's up, everyone? Welcome to Carry the Way, the official podcast of everydaycarry.com, where we nerd out about all things EDC gear and try to teach you something while we do it. I'm Bernard. I'm the founder of everydaycarry.com, and I'm joined by my editor, Mikey.
Hey,
Today, we're going to be hypothetically putting together some complete EDC everyday carry kits at both ends of the spectrum. So, for beginners or skeptics, as well as diehard enthusiast gearheads. But first, what's new with you, Mikey? What's going on?
I'm alive. Prime Day Part 2 just happened this week for Amazon, and it's our busiest time on the site. We work so hard to put together a nice list for people to spend their hard earned money to buy some EDC gear. And I think we had some really nice finds this year. It's like I was telling somebody that we've had more nice deals for the past two Prime Days over the past 5 years combined, I think. So it's been really good this year. Lots of actual good gear were actually on sale. You know how there's like fake sales. So I think we found some really good
Oh,
ones. We,
yeah,
we
yeah,
did pretty
fake
well.
sales and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, that list was crazy. I thought there were so many good like flashlights to be had, especially the ones that are like kind of co-signed by the flashlight community, especially on
Mm.
Reddit, sort of like the more enthusiast lights. Those are already kind of high value to begin with, but then there were just like even more deals. I kind of wanted to look into those. I ended up buying stuff, but not EDC related. I guess kind of EDC related. I got new Sony earbuds, the WF 1000 XM5s,
Mm.
but that's kind of overkill for EDC. But just nice to have a non Apple option.
Yeah,
As for
absolutely.
me, other than that, my brain worms are hungry for buying stuff too. Just like looking at watches. There's this Grand Seiko that was recently announced, and it's like my favorite watch brand. And they announced this model, the SBGW 297,
Mm.
and it has the my favorite case shape from Grand Seiko, and then um, my favorite colorway, just like white, black, silver, and then a blue accent seconds hand. And now I'm just thinking like, damn, I kind of like this heat treated blue hardware stuff so much so that I'm looking at CJRB Pyrite. It's like a budget knife, but they have
Mm.
an alternate version with like titanium handle and some blued hardware. That one looks very interesting to me. So I might just kind of feed the brain worms with that.
We should put a pin in both of what the things you just said, the thing that you like from the high end thing and the thing you like from the low end thing. And we should bring that back into our topic today because what are we talking about today?
Oh, that is true. We are trying to put together complete EDCs while thinking in sort of those frameworks. Because
Mm.
for me, I've been through EDC for over 10 years, like making, and refining mine. So I've been on the journey of like somebody who's just starting out, then also kind of like experimenting and getting my feet wet in the more higher end world for the stuff that I really value and care about and I'm willing to spend more for. And I think that journey is maybe daunting or a little bit confusing to people, especially when you first get into the scene. You'll see things that can be, especially on Instagram, things that are like really sexy looking. And you realize, oh, well, it's like $500 and that's just not for me. But it doesn't always have to be that way. And then
Yeah.
conversely, you can be in the game for a long time and it doesn't mean that you need to spend more and more to keep up with maybe everyone else you're seeing. There are people who have been doing this, longer than I've been alive, probably, that are sticking to the classics, and those don't cost that much either. So, we'll just break it down from both sides because I think there is a merit to both.
Mm.
What are your thoughts?
My thoughts is the first question we usually get from people is where do you even start, right? Because there's like this is an entire industry of
Mm-hmm.
products where you can start. People are going to see like the knives and the flashlights and the bags, but is that really where people should be starting? And I always think back to this thing that I learned early on. Um, and it's also kind of like very OG EDC. The three things that man can't produce on his own is something to cut with, something to light things up with, and also fire. And incidentally, very early on in EDC, those are the kind of like the three things that people started with. It was like a knife, it was a flashlight, and a Zippo. So I kind of like starting from that framework,
Yeah.
and then depending on the person, taking it like, what other things, like you like to answer this. I see you answer this in the Discord, like, um what are the exact specific use cases that you're going to do, and then we can build it up from there. And then, like you said, it can be like either high end or it can be low end, and the journey can be different for everybody else. But I kind of like bringing it back to that quote about the things that man can't naturally produce, because I think it's a really good starting point.
Right. Naturally. Unless you are some kind of mutant and
Yeah.
you are able to produce blades from between your knuckles or shoot fireballs. Yeah, I don't think many of us are mutants. To break that down, so there's those light, knife, and fire. Is there
Mm.
a cooler term for that? Because with the like the holy trinity or like the trio, right? It's knife, no, slice, light, right. That is almost,
Knife. Yeah, knife. Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
So instead of a lighter, it's a pen. I will say one thing. The thing about the lighter is that is either a vice type of situation where maybe you're smoking, no judgment there, but like that doesn't apply to everybody, or kind of a survivalist thing where you think you're gonna want to light fires, and even then the Zippo isn't the best choice. We're kind of getting off track here, but for other people,
Mm,
maybe if
that's right.
yeah maybe if that doesn't apply to you as much, then we can think about a pen instead of a lighter. But that sort of brings to the second point, and you were saying how I like to ask people what are the exact use cases you're going to anticipate running into. And the reason I ask that is because I don't want people, especially when they're starting, to prepare for everything and prepare for the worst, because that can get overwhelming. So that's why I like to start with a more minimalist approach, just to get people in the door, right? So, for example, this exercise that we're doing on the podcast, it's like building an EDC for a beginner. That's like the first half of it, right? If you were my friend and you ask me, hey, Bernard, I saw the stuff that you're doing on TikTok, kind of cool. I kind of want to get into EDC now. Like, where do I start? I'm going to give you the answer that is like, oh, you're just gonna want this. It's like simplest, and I think it'll work for you, rather than like a very core EDC mindset, because you can learn that later. Say for example, we might as well just start building the EDC. I'm gonna start with a flashlight. Okay, say this person wants a flashlight and they
Sure.
don't want to use their phone. I know I want to start with something that is fairly accessible price wise, so something on the more budget end. Okay. And then I also want something that is not too big, because I think one roadblock for a lot of people who want to get started with EDC is they cannot get over the idea or the image of them just being um, burdened and encumbered by cargo pants with pockets full of gear, right? So that's why I was thinking maybe a
And
smaller
that
flashlight.
also leads in, yeah, that also leads into the thing where they would defend their use of their phone as a flashlight, because like, why would I want to just carry something heavier? I already have a light on my phone. When
Exactly.
actually, it's about finding that one piece that's more carryable and like more compact, and is still better than your phone flashlight, right?
Yeah, you have to kind of convince them that the performance or ease of use or whatever it is, just the general experience is going to outweigh, or no, rather justify. Outweigh is not what you want, to justify the pocket space it takes
Mhm.
up. So
Exactly.
one of the front runners I was thinking of was maybe like a streamlight, uh, maybe like a micro stream, something in a familiar form factor. That's I also thought about a AAA light, right? But then I thought, I don't think people even own AAA batteries anymore. I think everybody uses rechargeable
Mm.
batteries or expects things to be rechargeable. So even though it, like back in the day, you would suggest like a Phoenix Zero One, E01 or something, right? Just a simple bomb proof AAA dedicated light, and it works. I think now people might expect some kind of rechargeability. So that leads me to like say something like a Streamlight, microstream USB, right? It's probably not the cheapest, but I think it's a good value for familiarity, ease of use, simplicity, and convenience and portability. So like all of those boxes. But then there might be something that's like what is it called, the Boruit V3. It's like this kind of plastic, weird, like double-headed, see-through, glow-in-the-dark, very like techie feature pack thing. But I think it's just too complicated and unfamiliar to recommend as a first light if you're not already like
Mm.
an enthusiast. But for enthusiasts, no matter if they're like into budget or high end, they're like, yeah, that's a cool light for like $15.
Well, for flashlight specifically, what's nice is the enthusiasts actually are trying to bring the price down versus like more high end stuff, because like they want to maximize there's a whole forum for it. It's called Budget Light Forum,
Mm-hmm.
where people want to like maximize their $15 for a light and still have it be able to like stand toe to toe in functionality with higher end lights, which kind of leads to the question of why would somebody spend more than that for a flashlight? Because like at the end of the day, what are you just trying to do, right? You're just trying to press a button and light comes out, and that should be enough for day-to-day things, right? So here's where our discussion starts. What now justifies paying $200, $500? I'm seeing people pay $1,500 for a flashlight. So I think we should start exploring on. This is probably going to segue into our other gear as well, but for a flashlight specifically, what constitutes something more high end? And I think I can do that with a demonstration for my pick. So I'm going to introduce one of the more popular lights on the site and also between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Loop Gear LEP. So this isn't the version I actually recommend. This is a more niche kind of like flashlight. There's a version of this which uses like a standard LED head, which is a bit smaller. And this is expensive. This is very expensive for a flashlight. And it's kind of like, I believe it's like over $400 for this specific model. And there's two big reasons for that: the materials they use and the craftsmanship for it.
Okay.
So this thing may look like your average like tactical flashlight, but it's actually black titanium. And it's the titanium by itself isn't black, so it goes through a process called PVD, phos, um, phosphor
Physical vapor
sorry,
deposition.
there you go. So there's a whole process to get it to look black to give it a bit more extra protection. And specific to this light, it has a few more functions that kind of tickle their fancy. Like literally, there's like fidgety features for it where you can lock it out with a switch. It has a spinny thing here. It has a spinny thing
Okay.
here. Yep.
Just by the way, for the audience, I'm not tickling myself with this flashlight. That's Mikey. That's Mikey's doing.
It's my fancy that's getting tickled. But yeah, so
Okay, yeah.
this is where
Go on.
this is where the discussion goes now, right? So this is a very expensive flashlight, but is that something that would be worth to you? It'll boil down now to considerations where do you want something that's just purely functional? Do you want something that's also aesthetic? Do you want something to be a mix of both? Because that's where the prices are going to get like determined between high end and the low end. So I guess the question you should be asking yourself is, do you want it to be functionality first as you build your EDC? Do you want it to start saving up for something that's really cool and also pretty functional? And yeah, so what are your thoughts on like paying for something this expensive, and in your experience with using something more expensive versus to something like a basic USB flashlight?
Okay, so that's a great counterexample. Just kind of like a contrasting foil to the Streamlight MicroStream. I have a Streamlight. It's the bigger one, the ProTac. So not quite the small pocket bowl what I'm talking about. And I also have this flashlight that Mikey has. Loop Gear sent it to us to review. So I didn't have to pay the $400 to $600 for that complete configuration. Just disclaimer. And would I don't know. I think we have to talk about how to determine if something is worth it for you, especially if you're a beginner. You kind of have to first, before you even care about the things that make it supposedly more expensive, you have to understand what they are. Like,
Mm.
you might get into this and not understand, for example, titanium, right? If black titanium is a big selling point here, you would need to understand the material properties of titanium, why that's beneficial. So spoiler alert, titanium is very strong, like comparable to like stainless steel, but significantly lighter, right? So it offers this kind of like performance with pocketability, but as a result of that, because it's so strong, it is hard to work with like on a machining level. So to actually manufacture, so to have like the proper tooling and engineering to make something out of this uh, less common material that is high performance, it also costs more. And then you slap on the colorway, which is not just a simple paint job or like a simpler process. It's more involved and also besides aesthetics, improves performance. That also drives up cost. But none of that will matter if you don't know about it or care about it or understand. So understandably, it's easy for a beginner to see something like that and then just immediately scoff. And
Hmm.
what's I think is funny, Mikey, you didn't even mention the performance of this thing,
Right.
what it does, like specs wise, output wise. It will smoke the Streamlight that I'm talking about, no question. But that's a completely different philosophical question. Do you even need that type of performance?
Right.
And if it is, and if you do, then you're just going to have to pay more for that in most cases. Now, this reminds me of we run into this question all the time as gearheads, right? It could be something like watches. I think luxury watches is maybe not more accessible than EDC, but it is related to EDC and it has grown in popularity lately, especially amongst guys who like who have gear related hobbies, right? You can use your phone to tell the time too, and or you could like buy a Rolex or whatever people are into these days, right? And it's just a significantly different price difference. But then you can extrapolate this further to, like, for example, you could live in a tent. So why are you paying a mortgage, right? Like there's just a
Yeah.
better experience involved there, right? So it's just finding that balance. And I
Yeah.
think to bring this back to the framework of beginner versus enthusiast, um, that's why I'm recommending the cheaper, lower investment stuff. Sorry, I know you don't like the word cheap, but the more price accessible, um, lower investment stuff than something like this, because I think it makes sense to go slowly and in a journey where it makes sense to you to own that thing and not like you try to pay your way, like pay to win, get a cool EDC, and then
Mm.
make sense of that. I think that's just backwards and weird. So that's my
Th-
thought on it.
there's a term you've just mentioned a couple of times now, enthusiast. What differentiates
Mm-hmm.
something to be enthusiast versus beginner, quote unquote, and how do you think that affects the price of something? Because like in the flashlight example earlier, the enthusiasts are actually trying to bring the price down to the more budget side of things, but that's not always the case. Sometimes enthusiast means more complications, something that's more complicated, better materials, higher end materials.
Hmm.
So how do you think, um, how would you define something as enthusiast for somebody starting out into EDC?
For you to be an enthusiast about something, I think there needs to be a level of like emotional investment and enjoyment that is irrational, that is beyond reason.
I
Um,
like that. Yeah.
so, and it can't be, yeah, right. It cannot be quantified or measured kind of objectively. And then then you can put whatever price you want on whatever that special thing is, right? I remember you asking like earlier in this conversation, what would it take for something to justify or like to make it worth paying $500 for a light? And immediately I was thinking like, we're not talking about mental illness, right? Like that, it's definitely not rational. It is just like something else. So I don't want to stigmatize enthusiasm when I'm saying that, because we're both enthusiasts. It's kind of just like self-deprecating humor there. But there comes a point where you can enjoy, say for example, like a pocket knife. You can just enjoy knives for them being knives and not some means to an end of I need a tool to get the job done. and that's where you start to gain enthusiasm and grow your enthusiasm. But not everyone gets there, not
Mhm.
everyone needs to. I don't expect them to, but it's just good to know and have the sort of context and understanding that there are people who do that, and they might be the people you see on Instagram or talk or hear from rather, because they're so enthusiastic. They're putting themselves out there. They're sharing their knife collections. They're kind of just invested in EDC as a movement, and they want to share that enthusiasm. And then there are going to be a bunch of people who are less vocal, who just like, yeah, I just want to grab like a solid thing off Amazon or Walmart or whatever and like get to work and get it done. And
Yeah.
both IMO are valid.
And that's when the discussions and the flame war start, where people make fun of one side or the other, like don't see eye to eye, because the functional people are going to be like, why'd you spend that much on a knife? You can just buy like a utility knife from your nearest Home Depot and open like thousands and thousands of Amazon boxes, which you're going to be using it for anyway, blah blah blah. And then
Yeah.
there's the whole other side of it, where it's like you can't put a price on being interested and passionate about something. Like, it's an experience to own and like be interested about something, and sometimes that comes with a cost. Like, you can be interested about Lamborghinis or Ferraris for cars. They're like the most impractical things you can spend your money on, or like fuel efficiency on the road. But man, look at them. Just look at them. They make life more interesting. They're like make your hobby more interesting. They make you excited about cars and motoring. And there's no price on that, right? Sometimes people are willing to pay the price to
Yeah, you cannot
be.
put a price on that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah. So nice that you brought up knives, because I think now that we've talked about flashlights for 15 minutes and went into a whole philosophical debate about it,
Yeah.
so let's talk about knives. What
Yeah,
would
let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. Let's make this EDC. Yeah.
yeah. So about knives, are you gonna pick something for the budget side, or are you gonna pick something for the high end side, and why?
So I kind of assigned myself to try to get the budget side.
Mm,
Just because I think that's where I gravitate more towards these days, just because of the work that I do, like say on TikTok or whatever, or helping write some of this content. I wanted to make EDC more accessible, and usually that means in the budget realm. And I've been, even just like friends and family and whatever who are asking me for recommendations, like um, I could give them one of my higher end knives, or I could just kind of give them an Amazon link to something like, I don't know, what am I going to pick? A couple that come to mind are like QSP Penguin, right?
mm,
Um, that's like a solid budget knife. But then it's not one of the classics. That's a more modern one. So if I were to recommend like one of the classics, there could be like, for example, the Opinel.
mhm.
And I can talk about why I wouldn't recommend that. And then also the like Victorinox Swiss Army Alox Cadet, right? That's another
Classic.
classic. And the reason why I don't want to recommend those is because they are too simple. I don't think they represent modern EDC and what how far like we've come and what the experience is like.
Mm,
Because something like a QSP Penguin, I mean, granted, it's like imported and it's fairly basic, but it's a good value that gives you kind of the experience of what it's like to carry an EDC pocket knife.
mm,
You could have, like I mentioned, those other two kind of like a slip joint. They don't have like really fast deploying action. The blade doesn't come out. You can't flick the knife open. And of course, that's going to be a consideration for people, certain people, depending on where they live. Like, because knife laws are a thing. But just imagine you have this basic, like thumb stud, flick open, decently sized knife with G10 handles. It's like a modern material. It's not wood or some kind of like proprietary aluminum oxide thing. And then it has a liner lock, which is a fairly common type of lock. And that kind of teaches you how knives lock and like how those work, right? I think that that is a good way to encompass the experience of a modern EDC when it comes to knives. For somebody who probably has never carried a knife and doesn't even know if they want to carry a knife, to make something like to convince someone to justify them carrying it, it has to be something that they use often and see the value in. And I think if it has like a pocket clip, a comfortable size, and a quick deployment, so there's as little friction as possible to actually using this thing, then they will learn to love it. So that's why I recommend something like the QSP Penguin. I also thought about the Civivi Elementum because it's a flipper, a rear flipper, and that as an option kind of gives people like in there's less of a learning curve, I think, to deploying the knife than flicking with a thumb stud. So that was an option, but it is a little bit more expensive, maybe double the price. So I'm going to go back to the QSP Penguin
There's a really interesting point
as an
that you made
example.
in the middle of that, where you were saying that the difference between a modern and one of the classic picks. And I really want to focus on that because understanding and getting to experience what a modern knife offers is the first step into being more interested in the more expensive and the more advanced stuff. And that brings me to my pick.
Mm,
And that's a good segue for me because you were mentioning about liner locks, you were mentioning about comfort and ergonomics and a simple thumb stud flipping opening. And these won't make sense to you at first until you're actually able to use it. But then once you get more experience trying out knives with that kind of style, you're gonna be able to see like, huh, this lock is a bit different. Kind of works for my hand a little bit better. The ergonomics of a larger knife kind of
mm-hmm.
work better for my wrist. It's more comfortable for me to use. And then you start going into the deeper stuff, or like you're kind of like narrowing it down and kind of like making it more specific, but also a bit more special, I think. And I like to say that because my recommendation is kind of like the extreme end of the QSP Penguin in like every single way. So this
Okay.
is the Wii Knife Solid. And there's a reason why I'm making this my pick and why I'm so excited about this particular knife. Um, this started out not from We Knife Company, which is one of like the premier imported knife makers. This started out as a custom by a man named Gus T. I'm gonna butcher his last name, Gus T. Cecchini. He's a oh my gosh, I forgot his nationality, but he's, I believe, an Italian custom
Isn't
knife
he
maker.
Italian?
I think he's
Yeah.
Italian. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He's a custom maker, and his specialty was making like these geometrically complex designs, where it's like a very futuristic looking knife. And there's a couple of things here that kind of like elevate this way above like a QSP Penguin, and I think which commands the price. So you mentioned a flipper opening, which is usually there's like a tab that sticks out the back of the knife, and then you flick it open, and then the knife comes out. This is what Gus calls
Mm-hmm.
like a spring loaded tab. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but there's this little thing that sticks out in the back. Normally, like there's a very clean line here. There's no flipper tab to stick out or to snag in your pocket, but just this little tiny thing here, it kind of flips out like that, and that becomes the mechanism for the knife to come out. That's one thing that makes this knife unique. The other thing is this
Yeah.
handle is
That
very
flipper
narrow.
tab is one of his signatures, right?
That's right. Yeah, the SLT. And the other thing is this knife is very
Yeah.
slim. And there's a reason for that slimness. It's because this is what's called an integral frame lock. Very complicated term, but that basically means the difference between
Mm.
this knife handle and a regular one is this is one whole piece of titanium. I don't know if you can see it here. This is connected in the back. There is no division between one side of the knife and the other. It's all one like wrap around like U-shaped piece like that. And to be able to machine something like this requires a lot of good design, a lot of good like industrial manufacturing capability, and also just like being able to still make the knife slim and have the blade still be centered and still pack in all of this functionality into it is basically what kind of jacks up the price like into like the big leagues. And this isn't even like this is, I believe, $400 SRP. But his original knives that are the basis of this one start at like 2,500. And that's just because of everything I just described: the functionality of that spring-loaded tab, the manufacturing capability you need to be able to do to be able to make a slim knife that's also capable of holding like a very chunky, large blade. So I believe that's the differentiator now for knives. There, like a lot of features on top of like high-end materials can now start like multiplying the price, and that can go also for a lot of different other products. But for knives specifically, you can see the difference if you hold this and compare it to like even just like a Swiss Army knife. You can appreciate the engineering that goes into it. You can start to appreciate like the functionality that goes into it. But what are your thoughts comparing to like a QSP Penguin for that?
Okay, so I have a couple of questions.
Hmm.
One, what percentage of the this GTC designed Wii knife do you think the QSP fits? Like, is a QSP Penguin 80% of that knife? Like, what is the remainder of performance percentage wise that we're paying, you know, 10x the amount for this thing?
I'd say QSP is 90% of the knife, and the last 10% accounts for 10x the
There it
price.
is.
There it is. Exactly.
Yeah, there it is. So the point I wanted to get at is once you're in this enthusiast realm, um, it is kind of understood that it is not no longer a matter of practicality, right? It's just a matter of refining things or just squeezing out the last few percentage points of performance, or even things that cannot be necessarily quantified or measured, like design value, design merit, right? The a signature type of design from somebody whose aesthetic and design language you appreciate or resonates with you. And maybe for Mikey didn't share this, but he is left-handed. He likes
Mm.
all black, and a flipper tab on the back is something that he can operate more easily, and it just works for him better. And it just happens to be like a custom, not a custom, but like a proprietary next level version of that type of technology. So, that's something that he could really resonate with. And then I think what I want to get at is the more you get into EDC, the more you want something that feels like, oh, this was made for me. And that's
That's an
when I
excellent
think
point.
it starts to make a
Yes.
little bit more sense, right, in paying for it. So to take this to the next level for Mikey is if it were left hand friendly, or maybe even customized to be only left hand friendly. um, that would be like very Mikey. Think of it like getting a bespoke suit. Like you could show up to an interview or your wedding or whatever with an off the shelf thing, probably won't pay that much, but then you could get something that's almost custom, like custom made, and it just feels better, works better, and it's specifically for you. And I think that really appeals to the enthusiast sensibility. Thoughts?
I really like your example of a suit, because I was just watching a video last week where um, Savile Row. There was this female tailor at Savile Row, which is like a very elite, like the elite of the elitist suit makers in the world. And like she said, the difference when her clients put on one of her suits that was measured like down to the millimeter for the wearer, the face that they make when they first put the final suit on is just like magic. You can She says that she can see the confidence just like bursting from them from the suit, like just that pure perfection of something that's tailored exactly to your exact measurements, your exact body type. It just makes you feel good. It makes you feel good about putting the suit on. It makes you feel good for wearing the suit. It makes you feel good about the price you paid for it. So it's kind of like there's 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 something to be said. There's no price on something that feels right to you. I think that's a very good point to make.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, when you use that knife, do you have more self confidence? Didn't think so. So your point is invalid.
You're calling me out because my actual favorite knife is a very budget $60 knife. That's actually the knife I use the most lately.
Oh, I
So
didn't even know that.
I'm in the budget camp for knives. This is more of kind of like a collection piece. I wouldn't use this as my daily like
Mm.
package opener knife, but there is like my absolute favorite knife right now is only $60. So There is some merit there. Even like having gone through like the very high end of knives and the very low end of knives, I'm settling my favorite, absolute favorite thing is that knife because um, it it's what you mentioned before. It's completely ambidextrous. It has a specific lock. I'll have a producer put up an image of what the knife is. It's the Vosteed raccoon. Um, it's I like the ergonomics feel really nice to me. The mechanism is very snappy to me. It's very fun to use, and I think like for people putting together an EDC, the, there we talked about it a little bit last week, but um, there is an element of you having to try it for yourself because you really EDC gear specifically is one of those things where people keep iterating and people keep improving on because they get to try it and it's like it's 70% of something that I would really 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 like. I mean it's okay, it gets the job done, but I kind of want to look for that last 30% to have like the perfect thing as a part of their EDC. And unfortunately for all of this, you have to try it yourself. Yeah, it's something you have to experience as much as use, as much as like just even just from seeing stuff from photos on the internet. Also,
Yeah. So we did talk about making a complete EDC at both ends of the spectrum. And we're failing at that because so far we have a knife and a flashlight. And
yeah,
then a bunch of just like philosophical thoughts. Those are
hmm,
less useful for opening boxes. So let's
that's right.
really quickly, maybe for just the beginner, just assuming like
Mhm.
the person listening to this is a beginner, if they have a knife and a flashlight, what else do you think makes sense for somebody who's just curious about making an EDC? Where do you think they would go next?
As a modern person in 2023, I'm gonna be a bit more practical. Water bottle and a power bank, I think, are two things that would be useful to absolutely everyone because it always pays to hydrate. There's a lot of options now for water bottles. There's a lot of different sizes. Some of them even come in like flat shapes that you can slip into a messenger bag. They can slip into your pocket. And a power bank just because like we're on our phones. We can't live without a phone. Can't live with like it's the most used. Probably a phone is the most used part of most people's EDC. So a power bank just to keep it alive to last throughout your entire day, I think would be my two next additions. What about you?
Okay, so you're saying a water bottle and a power bank. That doesn't sound very typical core EDC. Are you suggesting maybe that people can be pretty practical about what they include in their EDC and it doesn't need to be like some, aesthetic, really cool gadget sort of thing? Something as simple as a way to not die of heat during the day and keep their phone charged if they happen to rely on their phone as a useful thing every day?
That's the big secret into putting an EDC, isn't it? It's finding that balance between practicality and impracticality, and something fun and something useful. I think that's the main takeaway we should have for today. That it doesn't always have to be practical, but finding that right balance of something that you would use every day, finding that one functionality that would be useful in a day. Like an umbrella is another example. I hate carrying umbrellas, but I can see the practicality in it. I know some people who are in like rainy climates that need an umbrella like at the ready every single day. It's not something I would carry personally, but that specific functionality can't be discounted for those kinds of users. So, yeah, that's my thought on that.
Yeah, well, as somebody who lives in Los Angeles, California, I will discount the utility of an umbrella because we never need that. It's just always perfect here. So, sucks to be you. Sorry about that. Um, as far as what I would include, I mean, I feel like a water bottle and power bank is kind of boring, but I get it. Some people need that, especially if you're like commuting or away. If I'm working from home or whatever that day, probably and I do have a water bottle. And you're drinking from yours. Like I do have a water bottle. I haven't really considered it part of my EDC. But as far as like I'm recommending to a friend, they probably already have a water bottle and probably already have a power bank. That's kind of
Oh,
why I wouldn't
fair,
like these don't come to mind.
fair.
Um, right. So what I would say, um, Usually I like to think of everybody has an EDC phone wallet keys, like that's what they start with. Um, I guess you're probably not going to need to replace your phone because the phone you have, if it's like an iPhone or like a, Samsung Galaxy or like a Google whatever, it's like already way more capable than like any phone you would need. So no need to upgrade that to make it more EDC. I personally downgrade my phones to make them more EDC for me. That's a whole different episode. But the other two things, wallet and keys, I think for a beginner, very small optimizations that can kind of change your understanding or view of everyday carry, right? Some might argue, oh, I don't carry a wallet at all, or like I just slap a magnetic one to the back of my phone case. Like, sure, you do you if that works. But if you were coming from like this, just a department store wallet that your mom gave you like 10 years ago or something, and you're like, I don't love it, but it just works, then that's where we can like explore EDC wallets because that is definitely an entire category. And for a budget end kind of thing, I would recommend the Magpul DACA um,
Mm,
card holder thing. Basically, it's a very familiar function. Imagine just like a soft shell kind of tech material that is very thin and flat, and it just has slots for cards. Similarly, if you like a more tactical look, Maxpedition makes a similar kind of card wallet, but made with like materials. I think I'm going to guess that it's some kind of high denier nylon, and that's like a
yeah,
fabric that they
that's right.
would use on their soft goods like backpacks, tactical pouches, right? So you have two wallet options that are probably under $20, I think, maybe around that. But what they'll do is they'll significantly slim down your wallet situation while also giving you exposure to higher end materials, like more performant materials, while still keeping the learning curve low. Because you've probably seen like a card holder style wallet. There's, you don't have to really change the way you use your wallet, but you get to enjoy this like material difference, like literal material difference from trusted brands that are popular in the EDC space for their tactical accessories. And I think that's like one good place to start. And then for the keys, you could do something like Night Eyes S Beaner. It's just a more thoughtful, useful kind of keychain carabiner clip that's like sturdy and modular. I don't know if like beginners would really care for that, but it's also just accessible and it works better than your just run of the mill gas station carabiner. So those are two very, I think, safe kind of places to start expanding in EDC. Is just optimizing things you already own so that you don't have to add more to your carry, but you can substitute and then see the benefits. So that's where I would say. So we're at knife, light, wallet, keys, phone. That's pretty good. And then if you want like water bottle and then mobile phone, I mean, and power bank.
You had a really, really, really good point somewhere in the middle there, where a lot of EDC getting into both the enthusiast side and into the higher budget ranges is optimization. It's like small things where you already possibly have something similar on hand, but you want it slightly better. You want it slightly more optimized. And now that translates into the thing that we just built now. And also, where do you go from there? So, sure, you started out with a QSP Penguin, and then now you want to slightly optimize it. You want it to slightly better. You want to try out maybe slightly tougher steel. Maybe your knife is chipping on whatever you're cutting for the day. Maybe you like to cut into ropes as a hobby, and then it's slowly chipping away at the blade. The next slight optimization from there is a tougher steel. Maybe you take your knife out to the ocean, to the beach, and you're like, oh no, I get rust spots on my knife. Maybe I should look into some a slight optimization where the steel is a bit more rust proof or a bit more stainless steel. So, and now that transitions into the rest of EDC. All of these are slight optimizations. All of this is like min maxing, drilling down, narrowing down the functionality, and also having a bit of personalization and something that feels right to you, as we were talking about earlier. And now you can now take have like a fresh set of eyes on everything that you own, and now the entirety of EDC opens up to you. You've now built an EDC from a functionality perspective, carefully considering practicality versus utility. And now, what's the next step from there? Building something that's more specific to your day to day needs, building something that's a bit more optimized. It could be like the wallet is a MagSafe wallet that attaches to your phone. That's a slight utility upgrade. Maybe that's the move. Maybe your bag is not waterproof and you're expecting rain for the day and you want something that's just a bit more robust in that regard. So now that's, I think, the final frontier. And that whether you're a beginner, whatever your budget, whether you're an enthusiast with money to burn, that's always the final goal. Making those final optimizations to find in pursuit. I don't think you'll ever reach it, but just approaching that final pursuit of the final perfect carry for yourself, I think, is that last 10%. I think that's, we could actually title the episode The Last 10%, right?
The last 10%. Yes.
I
That's
like
what
that.
we're chasing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're down to that last 10%, that's why Mikey recommends having a portable power bank so you could top up
Mm.
the rest of the
Oh,
90%.
by
Yes.
reeling it back.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Perfect. I love that.
But you did bring up a good point that I wanted to pause and emphasize is this idea of optimizing as being the goal. And I want to make the distinction about optimizing things in your everyday carry is sort of the spirit, or at least a big part of the spirit of the practice of everyday carry, because you now see that people outside of the core everyday carry gear space use the term everyday carry. And it when they use something as a descriptor, like an everyday carry, whatever, or a daily carry, whatever, it's describing something that is like optimized for performance, functionality, and portability for the most part, to the point that they can use it every day. And this, I think, is a good evolution of the term everyday carry because it opens up what everyday carry can mean to more people and bring more people in. So what is that? What is this dude talking about, right? What am I talking about, bro? Imagine I am like, say I'm into photography or whatever. Like, a long time ago, I was taking photos of my pocket dump. I wanted to make them look better. I'm doing product reviews on like a 4.7's flashlight or something. Hella long ago. I want to learn photography. So I'm like in like different forums and like subreddits for photography and whatever, right? My current EDC camera is a point and shoot. It's not like a DSLR. It's not a mirrorless or whatever. It is a point and shoot. It's the Ricoh GR3. A lot of people, photographers, street photographers, they refer to the Ricoh GR3 as an EDC camera or a daily carry camera. But I don't think that they're, also at the same time collecting pocket knives and flashlights. That's just the term that they use. And it's something that's pocketable, high performance for how small it is. And it's just that tool that they use for their craft. And I think that that is a valid use of EDC or everyday carry or daily carry as a descriptor. And then we see this extend to things like tech, right? You see tech YouTubers on here and they have their own everyday carry update video and they don't have a pocket knife in them. So I think it's just cool to sort of remove or uncouple this idea that everyday carry has to do with the actual items themselves, but instead think of it more broadly as this approach or philosophy or lens or framework to the things that you use or deem essential.
And that's our goal. That's our goal with the site. That's our goal with what we do day to day. We want to help people find that thing where it's not always about buying something, or it's not always about the gear. It's about how is the things around you, how is the things you carry in your pockets useful to you and make your day better or make your life better. And I think that's a great place to end this, I think.
You would think so, but I like to have just a little recap for everyone who has been patient enough to listen to us for the past hour or so. So, what are some key takeaway points that we want to recap here? I think we talked about what does it mean to start in EDC as a beginner, and for that we recommend going for things that are not big time and space and money investments. So usually smaller things that are on the budget side or value side so that you can sort of understand why it could be useful for you or if you even need it or enjoy it.
Mhm.
And that is a low friction entry into understanding the product and what it does for you. Because now, as we moved on to the other half of this episode, the enthusiast side, it's really about chasing the last 10%. And to justify investing in getting that last 10%, whether it's like the hunt for that grail knife or the hundreds of dollars more for that type of material configuration, right? You need to appreciate those things on maybe an irrational level with passion and enthusiasm. And that is grown from understanding first what that thing is or does, that you can't put a price on. And then lastly, for both of these paths, right, on the spectrum, we want everything to sort of converge towards what works best for you as an individual. And that will take some time and testing. But that is the last 10% that you're chasing, is what makes this feel more and more like it's made just for me, that it works just for me, that it's a perfect fit. And I think that is the fun and the journey of everyday carry.
It's a journey. It's the journey, not the gear, right?
Yes, it's the friends we made along the way.
Exactly.
Speaking of friends we made along the way, you can make so many of those if you follow us on social media. We're at Everyday Carry. I'm at everydaycarry.com on TikTok. We've got a Discord. There's going to be a link to that. And you can find all of our gear and our newsletter at everydaycarry.com. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please like it, subscribe, share, send to a friend. All of that will help the channel and support us as we make more of this content. So until the next episode of Carried Away, be good, carry smarter, carry on. I don't know how we're going to sign this off, but thank you for listening. I'm Bernard. It's been a pleasure.
It's Mikey. See you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Till the next one. Peace.